Hey everyone, welcome to Strange Stories, where we explore near-death experiences and supernatural stories from people who've had a glimpse of the other side. If you enjoy our content, please consider liking the video and subscribing to our channel. Without further ado, let's get to the story of the day. Kamming Road is a two-way route that branches off of Highway 54 EDSA. This is a major thoroughfare that is used by both public and private vehicles 24 hours a day, and I live on it. I grew up in this area, so I'm familiar with the traffic and how Jeep drivers come and go as they like. It is common knowledge in this area that in a motor collision involving a human versus machine, an offender would be better off financially settling if the victim died in the process. This will explain the actions of the driver that caused my accident. It was early afternoon in February of 1986. I went shopping for a gift from my hubby and returned in a public Jeep. On my way home, I decided to stop at a convenience shop a few homes away. We rode right by my house. A parked car across the street was impeding our progress. The driver passed it and came to a complete halt in front of it. I exited the public Jeep. A parked car on my left side blocked any approaching vehicles. Before crossing, I looked to my right and left, but I came to a halt in the middle where the white line was due to an oncoming car on my right. I looked to my left and noticed a Jeep approaching from the main highway. It was a safe distance based on eye calculation. The approaching Jeep from my left was unimportant because it would stay in the left lane. I was in the center aisle, so I waited for the traffic in the right lane to calm down. I was taking a step forward with my right foot when a gust of wind rushed over my hair and caused me to swivel my head to the left. The last thing I saw before I could say anything was the approaching Jeep from the left lane abruptly occupying the right lane and slamming me on my left side. Witnesses described seeing me tossed a few meters away, but the driver did not stop the vehicle. Bystanders were shocked to see me trying to raise myself when I was rammed again by the same vehicle, and for the second time, I was hurled like a bouncing ball and landed unmoving on the right lane. Instead of stopping, the driver attempted to run me over. Something else was going on with me behind all of this drama. I found myself sprawled on the ground, and there was a silver thread connecting my lifeless body to myself floating just above the entire scene. I was startled to hear a voice telling me to turn my body from head to sideways, face flat on the ground, and straighten my feet. I viewed my unmoving body from that perpendicular posture to the wheels and began to repeat what the voice was commanding. Move. I viewed my unmoving body from that perpendicular posture to the wheels and began to repeat what the voice was commanding. Move. I witnessed myself being transported in a split second parallel to the wheels, with the chassis almost decapitating me. As my face rotated to the right, I noticed the chassis slamming into my head. It was as though three scenes were taking place at the same moment. Me, bloodied, beneath the rolling Jeep, perfectly aligned between the four wheels. Me, above, where all sounds were muffled except that forceful voice issuing commands. A family member who witnessed the accident said, "She's dead," since they saw me being run over by the wheels with my legs and head perpendicular to the wheels before to the last contact. They missed how my body was flipped sideways, just as the Jeep driver missed finishing me off. A caring passenger told me that an elderly lady embraced and followed me as the driver drove me to the hospital. The first hospital refused to admit me. The driver took my body with him, but even when the driver tried to jump my body in a remote deserted lot, the old lady refused to leave me. She begged the driver to take me to the hospital. He drove me to a public hospital where I was admitted to the emergency room. I awoke gasping for oxygen as I was being brought in. I received rapid assistance and had a full body scan, X-rays for shattered bones. I'm not sure how, But the doctors believe it was a miracle that, based on the elderly lady's testimony, I escaped that type of vehicular accident without fatal brain, body, or bone damage. The driver, on the other hand, lied about his identification and abandoned me. The old lady who was with me told the investigator everything that had happened. My husband was notified of the accident and arrived at the hospital, but the driver had already fled with the Jeep. I was admitted to the intensive care unit. She only left when she saw my spouse. But I never found out who this mysterious elderly lady was who stood by my side and protected me from whatever horrible intentions the driver had in his evil mind to get rid of me and avoid accountability. I was bedridden for a month, and during that time, some things began to alter in me, both emotionally and mentally. I used to be terrified of losing someone I care about, my hubby. I began to assert myself. And having previously been a rather passive wife, I began to become more conspicuous. I couldn't say I could predict the future, but I recognized I turned into an angel of doom. When death becomes clear, I can tell whether it's approaching. When I sense its presence, I always pray to God that it will pass over the individuals I care about. Death signs and symbols appear in my vision a day or two before it occurs, and I receive first-hand confirmation when it has claimed its victim. After the accident, my husband began to label me as a Satanist, which I'm not, heaven forbid, because I believe in and revere God. However, my sister claims that I have a cursed tongue that can curse someone who deserves it, but when I do, I suffer a dose of my own punishment. After a handful of occurrences, my mother forbids me from saying anything negative about anyone. On the plus side, if you asked me to pray for you to have a kid, I would instead pray to God for the lady to bear a child. However, what is the advantage of this? There's always a consequence and always a final outcome. The woman would be bedridden while conceiving. She will only give birth via cesarean, and the child will always be a baby boy. I just learned about this gift after a woman from a school requested me to assist her in praying for a kid because she was married late and desired a child. I told her that in a few months she will conceive and have twins. She rejected, stating that she only wanted one child. I told her she was going to have twins, but because she only wanted one, the other child would die. We met again a year later, and she told me what happened after she gave birth. Another woman approached me because she had heard about my talent and wanted to have a baby boy. She was a tenant in one of my mother's business locations. I looked her in the eyes and informed her that if I prayed for her to become pregnant, she would be bedridden and her business would suffer. She smiled and said that would never happen. Nonetheless, I prayed, and after a few months, she became pregnant. And according to my expectations, she began to have difficulty conceiving. She eventually had to close her shop because she couldn't keep up with the demands of her boutique because her husband had a job of his own. I went under the knife a year later after learning she had a baby boy. Meanwhile, another lady from the same school asked me to pray for her, which I did, but a month later, she revoked her request, citing a new job offer that would be jeopardized if she had a baby. I didn't say anything, but she miscarried 2 months later. Her friends claimed she had no idea she was pregnant at the time. I said my final words to her, telling her that because she was the one who rejected the lost child, it would be a long time before she could bear another child unless she repented of her denial of the kid's presence in her womb. Following the experience, I avoided praying for any woman. During those years of praying for others, I never had another kid save for my one and only child, a son whom I conceived while bedridden and delivered via C-section. These were my particular circumstances, which were somehow reflected in all the women I prayed for. Perla, my dentist neighbor, was also praying for a baby and stated it to me, half-jokingly asking me to please pray for her. We were standing in front of her clinic when I prayed for her, and she told me that others were praying for her as well. I informed her that her child would be a boy and she would have to give birth to him under the knife. She had a baby boy months later and underwent surgery. I asked her a few years later if she wanted another child, and she said no, not anytime soon. And the son is now 7 years old, still an only child. After a couple more women, I went quiet for a bit and stopped entertaining women who asked for prayers. Marianne, a student's parent, became a friend of mine in 2005. She would half-jokingly urge me to pray for a newborn baby because she already had a 6-year-old girl. On the side, her sister, Tessa, begged me to pray for her as well. I did it because I saw how serious they were. They both told me they were pregnant after a few months. Tessa was with me when I went to see Marianne about the infants in their wombs. Marianne was informed that the child is a male and that Tessa is expecting twins. Tessa responded by stating that she did not want twins. I warned her that if she denies her babies, they will die inside her. She was upset, but she didn't take me seriously. I asked Marianne why Tessa was furious at me and didn't want to meet me again a week later. She broke the news to me. Tessa's baby died the next day, and she was transported to the hospital. To cut a long story short, Marianne had a baby boy through C-section. She was irritated that she had to have surgery. I don't want to have anything to do with praying for ladies to have babies after Marianne and Tessa. I did it twice as an angel of doom and no longer wanted to think about this gift. My sister purchased a van in the 1990s, the most recent model of L200. Pinky was only a year old when Pinky's friend needed a bigger automobile, so she borrowed the van, and the female friend left Pinky her car as a guarantee. Unfortunately, this woman's hired driver had other plans for the van. He stole the van and then vanished. Meanwhile, my sister was unaware of the vehicle's abduction and returned the car, requesting the woman to return the van. However, as soon as the automobile was returned, the lady vanished without a trace. My sister reported the event, and the anti-carnapping unit issued a search warrant for her missing van. I found out about it much later. "What do you want to happen to your van?" I asked her when she was already frantic. "Do you wish for the driver's death? Or simply for the vehicle to be involved in an accident without causing too much harm to the driver?" She picked the latter, and 2 weeks later, a police officer arrived at her door to inform her that her van had been involved in a vehicular accident somewhere in Cebu, a city in the Visayas. We are on the major island of Luzon. Visaya is the second island, and Mindanao is the third. The van was totaled after the driver collided with a concrete wall. No one could explain why or how. However, the motorist was unharmed and was requesting compensation from his insurance company. The bright aspect of the story: despite the fact that her van had been missing for nearly 3 months, my sister continued to pay her insurance policy. The insurance company sought the person who held the policy and paid the monthly premiums. That was the key to locating the true owner of the van. Most importantly, I had no idea I would wind up teaching mathematics and science, because I had never intended to become a teacher. I am a chemical engineering graduate who worked as a shift chemical engineer in the field. However, following the disaster, I became completely interested with numbers and science in a new way. I began exploring the relationship between science and the Bible and discovered actual evidence that science and the Bible are inexorably linked if you know where to look and what to look for. Before the accident, I was not even like this. I lost my husband and felt no pain. People began to die, leaving me omens for me to notice. My cousin's father died, followed by 2 of his sons. My father died, and I felt no sadness, only a yearning for him to stay longer. My brother died on December 23, 2005. We were surprised by his death because it was July and he was still partying with his wife. Then, in October, he began to experience stomach aches. and by November, he was very ill. My dead father came to visit the other day, and he wanted to take me with him, he stated, after recovering in early December. He became gravely unwell 3 days later. The doctors encouraged us to let go, but my mother refused and requested last resorts such as blood transfusions and other treatments. But eventually, my brother begged out, "Jesus, please don't leave me," and he took his last breath. That night, I became very unwell as well, and would have died if it hadn't been for my son's prompt arrival because I was alone at home and vomiting and dehydrated. I recently got home from the hospital where I had a locked jaw for the first time. My stairs were being repaired when I stepped on a rusty nail embedded in the floor slats, which entered deeply and spurted blood. I was given antibiotics for 7 days, but I didn't get shots until late this afternoon. My sister claimed I was fortunate to recognize the warning flags. What she didn't realize was that I had been receiving signs, and my father and uncle had given me shivers on New Year's Day last year. Another thing is that I rarely sleep. Unlike in the past, my husband claims I would fall asleep as soon as my back touched the bed or a chair. I haven't gotten much sleep since the accident, yet I'm not exhausted or dizzy. And my hearing grew so keen that I could hear people conversing even if they were whispering. Even though I was on the 3rd story, I could hear a knock or a tap. I can feel someone's presence even before they knock. But I'm working on it. I'm becoming quite sensitive to sounds. I could tell when anything was in front of my eyes in the dark. For instance, when a branch nearly struck my eyes in the middle of the night, or when my sister believed I was going to strike my face on a jutting metal because I was side-blinded by a van side mirror. Finally, those who had seen me closely commented, "She doesn't know how to love anymore."